I'm joined again by my guest from last episode. She is the author of multiple novels, including her latest one that came out, The Other Lata, which is, I said, the perfect like spring summer book. If you haven't grabbed your copy, go get it. It's a perfect mystery with some lovable characters and unlovable characters. And we know I love a mystery. Please welcome my guest today, Kirthana Ramisetti. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me back again.
Now, I have to ask the first question, which seems dumb every time I ask an author, but just in case. What is your relationship to reading, and do you like to read?
I love to read. The interesting thing is, throughout my life, I've always considered myself a reader, but there have been times where I've not read as much as I wanted to for circumstance
Mhm.
reasons. And so sometimes I think of reading, I think of guilt because I'm like, I should be reading more, and I'm not. But I love reading. I can't imagine a world or a life without books and reading. I don't always get to sometimes as much as I want. I'm right now, since I'm promoting this book, not reading as much as I want to, but I hope that changes very soon. But yeah, my relationship is I've read for as long as I can remember.
Now, do you finish every book that you pick up?
I used to, but
Oh, okay.
I no longer feel like I have the time to do that. And so I think if I'm not grabbed by the first couple of chapters or the first 50 pages, I have to sadly just keep going. And sometimes it's not the book's fault. Sometimes you just lose
Yeah.
momentum and then it's hard to pick it back up. But sometimes, if you're just not, if the book doesn't have you, it doesn't have you also. So it just
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah. Now, what's your preferred method of reading? Audiobook, ebook, physical book?
I do all of them, and I've done all of them at various times. I've tried to listen to more audiobooks of late in the past few years because I feel like that's a great way to increase the amount of books I'm reading. And so
Mhm.
I've found that nonfiction books work well for me in terms of audio because
Yeah.
it's kind of like listening to a long podcast,
Yeah.
right? So,
100%.
and then the audiobook narrator is very engaging. It can make all the difference. And so, yeah, I do all of them right now. Like I'm in the midst of some book travel, so I think I'm favoring paperbacks. But I've
Mhm.
done them all. I like the sturdiness and the steadiness of a hardcover. I like being able to read on the subway on my Kindle. I like washing dishes and listening to an audiobook. So I do a mix
Yeah.
of all of them.
Yeah, I agree. During my 9 to 5, I'm always listening to an audiobook, and it's the only reason I read as many books as I do because it's just if it's like, especially I would say like I think an average book is like 8 hours, and that's like a
Mm.
few days in the office, really. Okay, and so for those who have read your books, are there any books that you would recommend when they're still craving what they enjoyed so much out of your book?
Well, I'll say this because it's someone else who said this and not me, so I'm not patting myself on the back. But I just saw on Instagram this very lovely bookstore called Beach Books. They compared my debut novel. They did that thing where you go, if you like this, then maybe you'll
Yeah.
like this. So it was like, if you liked Evelyn Hugo, then you'll like
Ooh.
Donna and Emily Henry's latest. I think it's called Great Big Beautiful Life. I'm sorry if I
Yeah,
got that
yeah.
wrong.
I haven't read Emily Henry's latest, but I agree with it does have Evelyn Hugo vibes. Interesting, yes.
Yeah, so I'll say that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. And then I was gonna say for the other Lata, I think I it was gonna be one of my book recommendations for you, but The Most Famous Girl in the World by Iman Hariri-Kia has the same kind of Anna Delvey vibe, like scammer and in this rich society kind of vibe. So I would suggest people read those two. But yeah, that's a good one. I actually thought of Evelyn Hugo while I was reading it. So as like Dava's telling her story and her, young life and kind of retelling it to her kids. So yeah. Now, what are some of your favorite books?
Um, this is such like a big broad question, right? But like
Yeah.
you think it'd be easy, but also it's just like I'll just start with my first favorite book, if that's helpful,
Yeah.
because I feel like it's remained one of my favorites to this day, and it's The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. Like I said, I was a voracious reader when I was growing up. I did a lot of Nancy Drew and the Babysitters Club and Sweet Valley High and all, the classics. But I remember discovering the Westing game in fifth grade and having it blow my mind in a way that books had never done before. Like, I loved reading, but I'd never been specifically dazzled by the way a story is being told. And it kind of rearranged my molecules in a way that I feel like I've been pursuing that reading experience ever since. And so, other favorite books include A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, both of Mira Jacobs' books, and particularly the Sleepwalker's Guide to Dancing, where I feel like I actually it was one of the first time where I felt like I got really seen by a novel in a way where I'm like, oh, I can see myself reflected in this book, which is also a very special experience. Um, Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children, which was an amazing book to read and immersive and blew my mind. And then also, I remember reading French Lieutenant's Woman in high school by John Fowles. And again, similar elements where I'm like, how are they pulling off what they're pulling off? Because the narrator is talking to me about the story he's telling me, and that also blew my mind. So, oh, that's a good list, I
That's a good list. That's quite a few.
think.
Now, what is it about certain books that really grabs your attention, or that you like, what are some of the things you look for when you're picking up a book to read?
I always think of books as being a very singular way to like a singular art form. It's one, especially as technology changes.
Mm,
Books are the one thing where you have to pay 100% attention. You can't be
yeah.
like have multiple screens happening and like half following a TV show with one eye while TikTok is on the other eye. You're either all in or
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah.
And so I look for a book that really kind of get me, like suck me in and like keep me going and like because a book also offers you insight into a person's brain and their thought process and their thoughts in a way that no other medium can.
Yeah.
So I look for books that let me do that, that in a way that is interesting and engaging. And again, we kind of always try and recreate that experience I had with the Westing game where I'm like, wow, this is amazing. How is
Yeah.
this happening? I always look for that in a book. I think that's the best way to put it for me.
Mhm.
I want to be dazzled, I guess. I don't know.
And is there anything specific, whether it's a trope, a theme, a main idea, a twist, a turn, a type of character that you really love and kind of crave when you're reading?
Metafiction was a thing that I really enjoyed when I was younger, discovering metafiction. There is Tom Stoppard's plays Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead and The Real Inspector Hound, which had an impact on me because he was playing with the forms of the convention in a way that was really interesting. In Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, it's about him taking two minor characters from Hamlet and having the entire play focus on those characters and what they're talking about while the main action is happening in
Yeah.
Hamlet, what they're doing when they're not in a scene. And so I just thought that was really fun and interesting. And then they'd always snap back into place when like the camera, quote unquote, camera was on them, and they would like do their scene with Hamlet, and the Hamlet would go away because he's the protagonist. And then they're the protagonist again in their story. And so what are they doing? You know, right? When they're not engaged
Yeah.
in the play's plot. So that was one. And then the real Inspector Hound is like I think if I remember correctly, I think at a certain point the critic becomes a part of the play. There's a the theater critic, and then the people on stage start talking to him, and then he kind of gets engaged and pulled into the play. So I always loved anything with a metafictional element. I remember that, and that's something I enjoy to this day. The same when I was mentioning the French Lieutenant's Women, where the narrator just starts talking to about the characters in the novel as a character himself.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I think again going back to Goon Squad, I love a flash forward, and I try to do that. I did that in Dava. Like, I think I was inspired by Goon Squad. I love when the author gives you a little hint of what's to come. When they say something like, "I actually said this in my second novel," and then the two characters would not speak again for several years.
Mm.
And then you're like, oh wow, that's profound, but also why? You know, and again, it wants you to keep turning pages. And I love how in Goon Squad she would do these fast forwards and flashbacks so seamlessly and magically. and it's something that I love to read too. And so I tried, if I can, I tried to put it in my
Now,
list.
what would you suggest to other people? Like, what is a number one book, whether it's a gateway into a certain genre, whether it's just one that was so profound to you? Like, what's a book you always suggest to other people?
You know, I was gonna. I mean, I could keep talking about Goon Squad, but I can't. I won't because I get so boring. So I actually was gonna pick two more recent books that I feel like I've been recommending to everybody,
Yeah.
depending on my, who they are or what I think they might enjoy. One of them, they're both nonfiction books. The first one is they call this Exceptional by Prachi Gupta, and it's about an Indian woman talking about her family and how so like it's the whole idea of that we want to, especially as South Asians in this country, or if you grow up in a diaspora, wanting to project exceptionalism and excellence in everything we do, but then the pain that the model minority myth can inflict within a family dynamic, and like how it can fractures individual relationships, fractures your sense of self. And I just think it's such a powerful book. And I really, after reading it, I'm like, every South Asian person needs to read this book. So that's a book I've been telling everyone, please take the time to read. I listened to it on audiobook and I found it very moving. So that's one book. The other book is for people who especially are my age or a little younger or older. It's I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself by Glynnis MacNicol, and it's about how she goes to Paris for a month just in pure pursuit of her pleasure and her pleasure only, because she's never been married, she doesn't have children, doesn't plan to have a family, and so she's redefining what this time of her life of being in her 40s means to her and how to make the best of her life and redefining what happiness is. It goes back to the idea of talking about life as a board game, which we talked about previously, and her like not having those traditional markers of success that
Yeah.
board game kind of reflects, but finding contentment and happiness with the own path she's made. And I love that she pursues radical pleasure and describes what that means for her, for herself, and finding a community and family in the friendships she cultivates and the pleasure she seeks, including the pleasure she seeks in like these trysts she has while in Paris. So I've been recommending that book to a lot of people too, especially people who are like similar in age to me.
So then, what are some books that people recommend to you all the time that you have not read yet?
I mean, this just happened like yesterday, where it's not someone just mentioned that they had read it. I'm like, why haven't I read this? That Bunny by Mona Awad.
Mona Wad.
And then
Well,
my friend just texted me about her latest one, Rouge, and she's like, "This one's even better." I'm like, "How have
okay.
I not read this? None of her books. I have Bunny on my Kindle, and I just haven't read it yet. So I feel like I have to start reading her because everybody uniformly raves about her work, and I just need to read it. And then for whatever reason, while I've read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, I've never read The Secret History, and that is the book that is always talked about. And it's like a
I haven't read that
seminal, like,
either.
yeah. I don't know why. I just is it like sometimes books just don't you don't meet the moment, or the book moment
Yeah.
passes you and you just
Yeah.
weren't on the train.
Yeah.
And so those are the two books I feel like I have to read at some point, and I just haven't, and I
Yeah.
couldn't even tell you why.
Kirthana, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving me any ounce of your time. I know we chatted for quite a bit, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was so fun. I love being able to talk about books like this. It's I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad. And where can people find you and where can they get your books?
Sure. You can get my books from my website, which is kirthanaramisetti.com. I have all the links there. Go indie, go bookshop.org if possible. I also have an Instagram, again, first name, last name, Kirthana Ramisetti. And then I have two Substacks. The first one is Free Happiness, which is about if you're looking for a little serotonin boost to brighten your day, that's what it's about. And then I have a Substack with my friends who are also pop culture authors called Ministry of Pop Culture. And guess what? We write about pop culture.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I greatly appreciate it. Everybody go out and buy your copy of The Other Lata. It's so good.